Folks, today's going to be a special episode recorded in English. We're talking to Garольд Chember's. Harold is, I would say, probably one of the few indispensable analysts when it comes to Northern Caucasus, Chechnya. In particular, Harold had a series basically of 4 articles written for Riddle Russia on how the transformation is going to be happening. What are the people of Chechnya that kind of govern the whole situation? Harold, thanks for joining us. I'll start with a very simple question. What will happen if Kadyrov Ramzan dies tomorrow?
So if Kadirov were to die tomorrow, there are a number of things that we would be likely to see. One, we would be looking for a change in the Kadyrov's positions in Ukraine, as they would likely be moved to shore up security in Chechnya. We would be looking at increased activity amongst the senior members of the regime, particularly Adam Delimhanov, Mohammed Daudov, Abuzaid Vismaradov, Muslim Hachiev. Basically, those people in the regime or recently in the regime who are now up in Moscow and still maintain strong ties, in Huchiev's case, who would be most likely to play some role in the next transition of power in Chechnya. Obviously, his kids are also going to play a role in this, but as they are all substantially underage in terms of taking over a gubernatorial role, the more veteran officials are who we would be watching more closely to take up a greater role in the Republic in the wake of Kadyrov's death if he were to die tomorrow.
If I understand the situation correctly, you have to be 30 to be the head of the Republic. So the oldest, Adam, right? No.
So the
Who's the
oldest
oldest?
son, Ahmad.
Ahmad. So, okay. So it's essentially 12, 11 years for him to be able to legally become the head of the Republic. So who would you say, if this is the course they're taking, saying that, it has to be a Kadyrov's rule of family of Kadyrov, who would be the ones kind of, helping him to govern the Republic? Obviously, 12 years is a lot. So who are the people that we could see stepping up on some positions, being like executive governors or however that would be?
So the main person in that case to watch would be Adam Delimhanov. This is not just because of his, extreme loyalty to Ramzan, and his longtime service as an official and security military experience. But he's the one that is most integrated into the full regime structure. So not just the security side or the bureaucratic side. He's the one that has the ties in Moscow, having served up there for a long time in the Duma. He's the one that has also in Moscow participated in a lot of extortion schemes to acquire greater financial stakes in a variety of Russian businesses. He's also been the one that has carried out a lot of assassination schemes on the Kadir regime's behalf abroad. So he's really the person that knows where all of the bodies are buried, so to speak, for the regime, both literally and figuratively. And so he would be that primary person that we would expect to see helping in whatever transitionary succession goes on. He is just going to be, right front and center there. There are others, obviously, Mohammed Daudov, we would expect to step up. Although the fact that he's already sort of been elevated in his recent promotion already sets him up to be playing such a role domestically, as Daudov and Vismuradov have sort of been those two key players in terms of maintaining domestic repression in Chechnya and sort of keeping everything under control. So we'd likely see them playing sort of the exact same roles that they already are playing. Delimhanov would be the main one to see some sort of major shift in his behavior, which reasonably has already grown rather expanded beyond his normal duties in recent years due to the war effort. Seeing him serving as part of the force to take Mariupol and then going over a couple other times to serve as a fighting commander, seeing him, going on missions to Iran to liaise with their foreign ministry and security services, presumably around the threat of Islamic State. And so we're already seeing him sort of start to break some of his old patterns due to the current demands on the Kremlin as well as on Grozny.
I know we've been discussing this issue off the record here, but why wouldn't someone like Daudov or someone else just grab the power for himself? I mean, 12 years time is a lot. I mean, one could speculate that in 12 years, Putin will no longer be governing Russia just for, for medical reasons, let's put it that way. Why does Kremlin want Kadyrov family to be the lead? Why not just choose someone who is already in prime of his life, has the reputation, has the know-how? Why would they need to keep Kadyrov's family in power, like officially, unofficially?
So there are a couple of reasons why it's probably more in the Kremlin's favor to try to keep the Kadyrov family in power. And so the reason for this is Delemhanov, Daudov, Vismuradov, as three of those names that are most talked about as potential successors for Kadyrov that outside of his family, they all have long histories with Moscow and especially the security services, and it is not a very good history. They're not particularly loved up there due to, I mean, they were former, separatists at one point. They've engaged in a lot of activity that shut out the security service elites from their stakeholds in Chechnya, that they had in the early 2000s. And they're not, and so that's like one of the big reasons is there is this historical stigma in their relations with Moscow, and it would be very questionable how much of it could be overcome. The second reason is that they don't have access to all of the financial resources of the regime. The Akhmat Kadyrov fund is held firmly within the Kadyrov family's hands. A lot of other businesses that have been, held by local oligarchs are starting to be passed over towards the children, as are some of the more external sources of funding. So, we see this very close relationship between Tabarik Kadyrova and the Sheikh Zayed Fund, which is this fund allegedly for development that was co-created by Ramzan and the former president of the United Arab Emirates. And, for development, it does a lot of contracts and money flowing towards the Kadyrov family, the Kadyrov children's businesses there. So it's that, Delemhanov, Daudov, the others, they don't have the financial stake to fully finance and operate the regime in the same way. There's a third reason, the entire sort of legitimacy, the more symbolism of the regime, it's all oriented straight to the Kadyrov family. And this isn't something that could just, be flipped on a dime here to then work for the Dowdas or the Lemonovs. You'd have to entirely break down this sort of, the structure of, I mean, like everything in the Republic, is jokingly, or, the joke is everything in the Republic is named after Ahmad Kadyrov, but that's not really that's barely a joke at this point. Like everything is surrounding the Kadyrov family personal cult. And, the sort of attempt to use it as a means of channeling uh, channeling this sort of, this next generation of youth in the Republic towards all of these different organizations, be it, combat sports or whatever, everything's done in the name of Ahmad Kadyrov. And so that's yet another reason why, it's going to be easier for Moscow to try to keep the Kadyrov family rather than the others. The final reason really would be if the Kremlin does want to try to sort of renegotiate its stance towards Chechnya and, try to rein it in some from its large-scale autonomy, that's going to be easier to do with somebody that is relatively new to the picture, such as one of the children, rather than a well-established figure such as Delemonov, Daudov, Vismuradov.
Do you see some sort of a scheme or some sort of a foolproof mechanism so that the kids among themselves do not fight for whoever is going to be the ruling one? Because obviously, in the case of Ahmad to Ramzan, Ramzan was the only one there in the picture from the get-go. But when we were talking about the kids of Kadyrov, Ramzan, I mean, of course, there are many of them, right? There's like quite a few of them that are already taking positions, and there are like plenty other kids running around. How do you secure the chain of command there? Do we see like a potential for infighting of some sorts?
I mean, I would say that there's definitely a potential for it. I mean, already, just amongst analysts, and sort of debating, oh, who's the favorite to succeed? You already see this competition going between Ahmad and Adam. So there's already sort of some of this competition that's like expected. Some of the question could certainly come down to sort of, the temperament of the children. So I mean, Ahmad seems typically to sort of just be, a head down, do the business side of things, and just keep doing governmental work. Ali, has been off, honestly, who even knows what he's getting up to half the time? Sometimes he's, an MMA fighter. Sometimes he's just doing like drag racing in his cars. So like he hasn't necessarily shown the same inclination to participate in the regime in the same way. Obviously, Adam is the one that gets a lot of attention due to his emulation of his father, beating prisoners on tape and trying to create this sort of his own little personality cult. So there's definitely potential for some infighting. I mean, I would say that Adam is probably the most perhaps aggressive towards showing a desire to follow in his father's footsteps. Some of this could obviously be mitigated by some sort of power sharing setup. Like, I mean, we've like for a long time in Chechnya, at the level beneath Ramzan, you see this sort of managerial separation of powers. Daudov handles these things domestically. Vismuradov handles, these other things domestically. Delemhanov handles these things abroad. And so it's very possible that you could see sort of a redistribution of some of those powers, depending on who takes what role. And so you could sort of see some replication of that. Ahmad has been the one that's taken a lot of trips to sort of establish foreign relations and all these, and ensure that the regime's ties to different Middle Eastern countries will continue into the next generation. Adam hasn't really done any of this. He mostly will just meet with somebody if they happen to be coming to Russia, especially Grozny. Ahmad is this one who still is demonstrating that he's playing this proactive role in governance generally, but also, foreign relations and sort of economic side of things as far as the sons go. So yes, there's reasonable potential for infighting, but there are ways that it could be mitigated. Obviously, that would itself represent this pretty big shakeup in power structures of Chechnya. So it's unclear whether or not, Ramzan or the Kremlin would be willing to account for that. But also, there is this difference between doing it formally and doing it informally.
But Ahmad is the one that met Putin, right?
Yeah, so Ahmad met Putin the night before his wedding, as did Ali. There's been no reports of Adam having a meeting with Putin, even though he supposedly also got married on the same day as Ali. I'm sure Adam has met Putin, but had a meeting with him. There's been nothing publicly
Well, yeah, I mean,
about that.
if you see them on TV, that's like the blessing, right?
Yeah.
In the case of Ahmad, do we have any updates on how Ramzan Kadyrov feels? I mean, just a few weeks ago, he had like say a bloated face, seemingly not feeling well at all. And the last couple of days, I've seen pictures of him looking like younger and more lively, I guess. Do we know if something is happening there, or maybe the rumors were false, or what is the situation there?
I don't think any of the prior rumors are necessarily false. I mean, he had to have had some operation, because there's no way that he got rid of the bloating, the weight, the redness. Like, when I saw the videos coming out, I assumed that they had to have been, archival footage. But then I saw, them popping up on, media channel after media channel, and it's like, no, he looks and sounds as he did a decade ago. I really don't have any explanation for it other than he had to have had some operation, because there's nothing else that really makes sense. I mean, we've watched him over the past few years. We've watched his image sort of fluctuate in terms of how he looks. But this is just like a complete 180. He looks better. But based on any of the reports, there's not exactly any cures for any of the, ailments that he has supposedly had. And so I really do not know. I could not really explain what has just happened. And I mean, it's certainly not going to be something that he's going to address, other than probably to troll the media, with this classic, like, oh yeah, they all said I was going to die. Do I look like I'm going to die? I'm sure he'll do something tongue in cheek like that, but otherwise, who knows?
Well, part of the story here is that he interfered in a rather large, kind of a big, very big financial story with the Wildberries and major kind of merger story. And, it's not common for Russian governors to interfere that way. And moreover, we've seen some commentators saying, look, this is the new quality of Kadyrov's regime. This is something that usually only Kremlin kind of interferes in. So this kind of, gives a very different quality to Kadyrov's regime, and certainly doesn't speak of personal decline of Ramzan. So again, I mean, I know what you've said already, but this is just 180 on all the previous stuff we've seen and what we've suspected would be the case. I don't know, any thoughts, or just we need to
Yeah.
kind of keep on watching.
For the wild berries, I do think we just sort of need to watch because, a lot of the analysis and takes that I've seen, operate on substantial, assumptions that, Kremlinology works on. Um, but like we don't know what Kadyrov's current relationship is with Karamov. We don't know, which is a major factor in here. Previously they've sort of been on the same side of, business disputes and such down in the North Caucasus, such as, when there was the fight over ports in Dagestan maybe 6 years ago now. Um, and so, it's definitely regardless, Kadyrov is looking to either grab a stake in the business or expand an existing stake in the business. But what game exactly is being played out here, it's a little uncertain um, what exactly is going on because it's not even necessarily clear who all of the actors are. Like I mean, even Karamov is a, an understood to be involved person. It's not necessarily he's actually on, the official, titling of the companies for this takeover as the Mirzoyan brothers. There's some other rumored individual Ingush businessmen that are reportedly involved in one of the sides if follow all of the rumor mill Telegram channels. So it's one of these incidents where it's very clear that something's going on, but what is actually going on, I think still remains to be seen if we'll know at all.
All right, and finally, I'll just ask, as an observer, what would you say are the three um, metrics, three kind of dimensions that we should be looking at if we want to, kind of stay on top of things in Chechnya and broader the regions? What would you say are the things or the signs or the people or groups of people that you would recommend observers to look at to notice substantial shifts in the region?
I would say number one is the two opposition channels, Adat and Niso, particularly when it comes to reporting kidnappings. Um, this one, they've been pretty darn accurate. Um, and it really can help sort of indicate when something is going on. It can help confirm timings of events. Um, and it can also, especially after Kadyrov shut down the mobilization effort in, September of 2022, the fact that we could still see mass kidnappings going on helped confirm some of the otherwise anecdotal accountings of the Kadyrovцы continuing this secret mobilization drive. So the opposition channels, I would say, are the first and sort of thing to watch as far as indicators go. Um, the second one I would say is watch basically all of the children in government, but particularly Ahmat and Tabarik. Um, And the reason for those two specifically, the children generally, because as they've become integrated into the regime, they've sort of helped bring some shade of transparency to how the regime operates, because we can see what's valued, we can see we can better see what businesses they are holding and what businesses they're taking over, which helps indicate the financial extent of the regime. And so for that reason, Tabarak in particular is important. Ahmad is particularly important, not necessarily because he's the eldest son, but because he's the one that's sort of being used as this leading player in how the regime is trying to change how it operates and expand its influence. Back in, it must have been last March, in March of 2023, he started off the month meeting Putin, then getting married, and then he had this incredible month of activity. And one of the most notable things was he went on this big trip to Azerbaijan. The regime had not previously really engaged with the Aliyev regime. And so this was this new development in trying to expand relations for Kadyrov, and presumably also for Moscow in terms of strengthening regional ties. Just within the past week or so, there's been this new announcement of this planned transport corridor across the North Caucasus to Baku. And so this is sort of, he's a good one to watch in terms of how things are starting to change and how they're sort of trying to expand their influence in this new political status quo. I would say those are the two most significant sort of indicators to watch, channels to watch in terms of who's doing what and how things are changing. Obviously they're all of the old ones, Kadyrov's Telegram channel. Personally, watch what Adam Delemanov is doing. I would say the final thing to really watch sort of continuing is how Kadyrov regime officials are being brought up to the federal level. So, we saw this recently with Muslim Hachiev being brought up into Mishustin's office. We saw it previously with Turko Daudov, who was Ramzan's representative to the Middle East. We saw him brought up into the presidential administration, and he's now Russia's representative to the Organization of Islamic Countries. So basically serving the same role, but formally for the Kremlin. Alaudanov's, sort of recent stronger integration into the Ministry of Defense. And Daniil Martynov was brought up into the Ministry of Emergency Situations. So there's clearly this trend going on of major Kadyrov regime actors being brought into the Kremlin, and sort of how this is continuing. That's definitely one of the main things to watch. Not just because it has implications for personnel changes back in Chechnya, but because it really helps illustrate the circle of trust up in Moscow.
All right, that's actually a lot of things to watch, but we'll count on you to be watching all those things, and hopefully we'll get back to this topic soon enough. All right, thank you for your time. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.